Whether you think you can, or think you can't, you're right, says the man who revolutionized the automobile industry in 20th century. Henry Ford is a prominent American industrialist, one of the most successful businessmen of all time. At a period when the primary means of transportation were railroads or horse carriages, 16-year-old Henry left his father's farm and eventually created a successful company, Ford Motor Company, which changed the direction of the automobile industry. Henry Ford did not invent the automobile nor the assembly line. But more than anyone else, he turned the automobile from a curious novelty into a revolutionary product that changed the course of the 20th century. His humble beginnings were typical. On July 30, 1863, Henry was born to Mary and William Ford in Wayne County. That later became Dearborn, Michigan. He was the oldest of 6 children. His father was an Irishman from County Cork, who moved to America in 1847 and settled on a farm in Wayne County. Henry has always been fascinated by machines from a young age. His father gave him a pocket watch when he was 12, which sparked his interest in mechanical devices. He began spending the most of his free time in a small makeshift machine shop that he had set up himself. By the age 15, he was disassembling and reassembling watches of his friends and neighbors, which earned him the title of watch repairman. Henry grew up in the family farm assisting his father. His father William Ford wanted him to take over the family farm business, but Henry had little interest. In 1876, his mother Mary Ford passed away of an unexpected illness. Henry was very close to his mother, and devastated after her death. In one of his letters, he mentioned, "I never had any particular love for the farm, it was the mother on the farm I loved." Henry didn't like school and didn't make it past the 8th grade. He preferred to learn things on his own terms. He studied every piece of machinery he could get his hands on. In 1879, at the age of 16, he left the farm to become an apprentice at the Michigan Car Company, a manufacturer of railroad cars in Detroit. Unfortunately, Henry was fired just 6 days after starting work. Then he joined as an apprentice at the machine shop of James Flower and Brothers, where he received $2.60 a week. Henry got a night work as a jeweler cleaning and repairing watches, for 6 hours a night and 6 days a week for $3 per week. Over the next 2.5 years he held several similar jobs. At the time, Detroit was fast becoming an industrial metropolis due to the steam engine, and the city was eager for young engineers looking for work. Henry reinvented himself by studying everything there was to know about machines. He returned home in 1882, but didn't do much farming. Fortunately, his father had acquired a portable steam engine, which was rapidly becoming the norm among farmers. Henry spent the most of his time with this machine and got so skilled with it that a neighbor hired him at $3 to operate his steam engine. He started operating and servicing portable steam engines used by farmers, occasionally worked in factories in Detroit, and cut and sold timber from his father's land. His talent and knack for machines spread throughout Michigan. The district agent of the Westinghouse Engine Company of Schenectady, New York, heard about Henry's talent and hired him. Henry's job was to travel throughout southern Michigan, installing and maintaining steam tractor engines. Henry met Clara Bryant at a New Year's Eve party in 1885, and they got married in 1888. Around this time, Henry came across a British magazine and learned about the gas engine. This gas engine was being produced in small quantities by a German engineer named Nicholas Otto, and was very different and far more efficient than steam engines. This gas engine didn't require 30 minutes to start up, because the engine did all the combustion needed internally. Henry quickly fell in love with the gas engine, but he couldn't comprehend how it worked, because it was fueled by an electric spark. Henry knew he had to learn more about this. So the couple moved to Detroit in 1891, and Henry accepted a position as a night engineer for the Edison Electric Illuminating Company, at a monthly pay of $40. He viewed the position as a chance to learn in part. The company was the largest electric company in Detroit at the time, and it used a steam engine to generate energy for 1,000 residences in the city. Henry's primary responsibility was to fix the engine. Whenever it malfunctioned, but he had little else to do when it was working properly. This allowed Henry ample time to immerse himself in the study of electricity and its operation. In 1893, Henry and Clara Ford welcomed their first and only child, Edsel Bryant Ford. Just 3 months later, Henry was promoted to the post of chief engineer with a weekly salary of $100. In the same year, Henry created his first functional gas engine, a small one-cylinder gasoline model, which was the first step toward realizing his aim of producing a horseless carriage. The first Ford engine sputtered its way to life on a wooden table in the kitchen of the Ford home at 58 Bagley Avenue in Detroit. A later version of that engine powered his first automobile, which was essentially a frame fitted with 4 bicycle wheels. At exactly 1:30 a.m. on June 4, 1896, he built his experimental car with a gasoline engine, first Ford car, the quadricycle. While the experiment was successful, the quadricycle was essentially consisting of 2 bicycles put side by side and powered by a gasoline engine. This experimental vehicle featured 2 gears, although neither was for reverse or forward motion. However, the major difficulty was that it lacked a cooling mechanism, therefore it was prone to overheating after prolonged operation. Henry made numerous modifications to the car, but the most significant was the installation of a cooling system. Later, he sold the automobile for $200, and utilized the proceeds for another major project, with the backing of the mayor of Detroit. Henry began construction of his second experimental automobile in 1898, and completed it in 1899. This new automobile was larger, more robust, and heavier than its old version. One morning, Henry drove William Murphy, a wealthy lumber businessman, for a test drive in his new automobile. William was so impressed that he immediately offered a deal to form a company. On August 19, 1899, Henry resigned from the Edison Illuminating Company, and formed the Detroit Automobile Company, with William and other stakeholders. Unfortunately, the company went into bankruptcy about 18 months later. Henry's ideas for improving the car he was working on were not in line with the ideas of the stakeholders, who were pressuring him to make passenger cars. Most of the parts needed to make his cars were produced by different companies, and as a result, whenever a delivery was late, the production was delayed. Henry's first car, which he called the delivery wagon, took 6 months to make, and only 20 were produced during the company's first 2 years of existence. Despite knowing many prominent individuals in the city, few of them were ready to invest in his ideas after what happened with the Detroit Automobile Company. He was optimistic and continued working on the racing car. In one of them, called Sweepstakes, a 26-horsepower vehicle, he defeated Alexander Winton on a track in Grosse Pointe, Michigan on October 10, 1901. Immediately it became the talk of the town, and investors gained trust due to its popularity. 1 month later, Henry founded his second automobile venture, the Henry Ford Company, with him as its chief engineer. Henry's position was again in jeopardy, because he continued to make race cars, which infuriated his investors, who wanted him to create passenger cars that they could sell to the masses. So they hired Henry Martin Leland to do their bidding. Ford was upset about that and left the company. Henry Ford is quoted in his autobiography as saying, "I resigned, determined never again to put myself under orders." Henry Leland, on the other hand, followed the wishes of his investors and went on to create the Cadillac. With Henry Ford gone, the company's name was changed from Ford Motor Company to Cadillac Motor Company. Henry Ford, and a former racing cyclist by the name of Tom Cooper, continued building racing cars. In 1902, they produced the Ford 999, an 80-horsepower car that was driven by a former bicycle racer, who had never driven an automobile. Henry had proven himself as the best American designer for racing cars again. On June 16, 1903, Henry and 12 others invested $28,000 and created Ford Motor Company. The company rolled out the first car, Model A, on July 15, 1903. By the end of the year, 500 cars were sold. The price of a car was $850 then. Henry owned 25.5% of the stock in the new organization. He became president and controlling owner in 1906. Henry was resolved, not to fail again after his first 2 attempts. The next model car was launched, called Model N, which was well received, with 7,000 sold in just 1 year. The Model N was retailed at $600. At the time, owning a vehicle was a luxury that could only be afforded by the wealthy. This was since these vehicles were made by highly skilled engineers, and the majority of automobiles were made for racing. When Henry founded his third company, he made a promise to his associates and investors. "I will build a motor car for the great multitude, made of the finest materials." Ford was after building a simpler, cheaper but finer version of the car. Ford's dream came true when he released a new car, Model T, and it cost $850. Model T had a huge amount of success. In just a few months, around 6,389 Model Ts were sold, and the demand for the Model T quickly grew faster than the supply. Ford was now faced with a new problem. How could he make a lot of cars without raising the price? Henry learned from his failed businesses the importance of having one manufacturer supply most of the parts to build his cars. So, he founded a machine shop in Detroit to do just that. During a trip to Chicago, he witnessed the assembly line concept at a slaughterhouse, which sparked a brilliant idea: a moving assembly line. If he could incorporate the same concept into building his cars, he could produce more vehicles per day. If every employee remained at one place and worked effectively on a given task, they could meet the demand successfully. In 1905, Henry built his own manufacturing company to begin producing his own engines, transmissions, and other components for his automobiles. He set up a production plant on 60 acres of land in Highland Park, Michigan. Around this time, Henry also discovered vanadium steel, which was about 3 times stronger than the previous steel and much lighter. Henry used vanadium steel for his new model, which became one of the most successful automobiles of all time. Not only did Henry could increase the wages of the mechanics, but he also gave them an hour off. He was able to manage the work shifts, hire a new set of workers for a third shift, and create a 24-hour operation. He created a strong, efficient production unit with a moving assembly line, and reduced production time to unimaginable levels. The Ford Motor Company could now produce the Model T in less than 12 hours, cutting production time in half. Ford worked tirelessly to perfect the system, and his efforts were rewarded. His company began manufacturing a new car within 93 minutes. Ford reduced the price of his car by $100 as he saved on the production time. It also helped him realize a lifelong dream of his, to build a car that the average person could afford. Model T Black sales continued to rise as the price began to fall, until the Model T reached a low of $290 in 1927. By 1928, half of all cars in the United States were Model T. The Model T was the most popular car in the 20th century, selling 16.5 million units between 1908 and 1927. In 1919, Henry, Clara, and Edsel Ford acquired the interest of all minority stockholders for $105,820,894, and became the sole owners of the company. Ford was a pioneer of welfare capitalism, designed to improve the lot of his workers, and specially to reduce the heavy turnover that had many departments hiring 300 men per year to fill 100 slots. Efficiency meant hiring and keeping the best workers. Ford again surprised the world in 1914 by raising the minimum daily pay from $2.34 to $5 for qualifying workers. He saw the higher wages as a form of profit sharing linked to rewarding those who were most productive and of good character. Ford's policy proved that paying employees more would enable them to afford the cars they were producing, and thus boost the local economy. In addition to raising his workers' wages, Ford also introduced a new, reduced workweek in 1926. In August 1926, the Ford Motor Company's factory workers switched to a 5-day, 40-hour workweek. Ford decided to boost productivity, as workers were expected to put more effort into their work, in exchange for more leisure time. Over the years, Ford had made a great impact on people's lives and transformed the company in different ways. Edsel succeeded his father as president in 1919 and worked until his untimely death in 1943. Henry Ford returned to the post. In September 1945, when he resigned the presidency for a second time, his grandson, Henry Ford II, was elected as president by all the board of directors to lead the company. On April 7, 1947, at 83 years old, Henry Ford passed away of a cerebral hemorrhage. He had a remarkable life and made Ford a brand that was recognized across the world. In 1965, the United States government honored him by featuring his likeness with a Model T on a postage stamp as part of their Prominent American series. In 1999, Fortune magazine named Henry Ford the businessman of the century. Ford once owned 5 other luxury brands: Volvo, Land Rover, Jaguar, Aston Martin, and Mercury. Over time, those brands were sold to other companies and Mercury was discontinued. Ford Motors Company is one of the largest family-controlled company in the world. Been in the industry for over 110+ years, with market capitalization of approximately $45+ billion. From this video, you should learn that life is a series of experiences. Each of them makes us stronger, and gives an opportunity to learn something from it. We must learn that the setbacks and sorrows are part of life or any new ventures. Hope you enjoyed this video. See you soon in the next one.